Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sherry Welsh Coaching Podcast. This is Phil Johnson speaking, and with me today is Sherry Welsh. Sherry's a leadership coach who works with professionals, individuals privately, and groups within companies, and she's also an author. You can get her book, which is titled Slowing Down: Unexpected Ways to Thrive as a Female Leader, from any major book retailer. And you can also subscribe to this podcast, the Sherry Welsh Coaching Podcast, on iTunes, Google Play, and other podcast directories. Sherry, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Phil. Great to be here.
Now, Sherry, this is the second in a three-part series that we're doing on the subject of trust, which has been coming up in a lot of your individual and group coaching sessions. And I just want to remind everyone, you have a helpful graphic called your trust model that's available on your website as a download at sherrywelsh.com/downloads that shows the three key components for building trust that you've observed, which are integrity, transparency, and communication. And in our last podcast, we gave an introduction to these three things overall, and then we dove into the subject of integrity, which I think you gave a really helpful definition of, simple and easy to apply, and that is that to act with integrity is just to do what you say you're going to do. Of course, these three things, integrity, transparency, and communication, they are all intertwined and interconnected. So in a sense, it's a little bit difficult to parse them, but for the sake of our discussion, we're doing that a little bit. And having gotten into integrity in the last one, in this podcast, we're going to get into transparency. So I wonder, Sherry, if you could begin today by telling us in a little bit more detail what you mean by transparency in this trust model.
Sure. So transparency for me is what I'm seeing in organizations that I'm working with is that everything isn't put on the table to work with. And when things are held back, whether it's information or a conversation or a data point or whatever it might be, when a team is moving towards a goal together or an objective. When not everything is on the table to work with, there's a lack of cohesion, there's an inefficiency in the team moving forward and the dynamic that occurs. So what I found with transparency is really, let's get everything on the table. And the thing that comes to mind for me, there's a great scene from Apollo 13 movie with Tom Hanks. And there's a scene where they have to create something that is a square peg fitting in a round hole. And they throw a bunch of parts on a table and say, using nothing but this. That's what transparency means to me. It means let's throw everything on the table that we're talking about in order to get all the great ideas generated, everybody's input, everyone's perspective on the table so that we can make a decision that makes sense for all of us. So if it's not, if people hold back on sharing their opinion or they hold back on a piece of the negotiation or a piece of the project, and ironically, because they don't trust the other people in the room, you're not going to get a solid result. You're going to get just a partial result. And then you're going to have trust erode because people are going to find out you held something back. And now they don't trust you going forward. So it's really a way of being open, a way of being honest, a way of being, I'll say, play all your cards or show all your cards. Not irresponsibly, but professionally, appropriately, everything that's relevant, put it on the table so that we all can do the best work possible in the most efficient way to achieve this goal or finish this project or solve this problem, whatever it is that you're working on together.
Mm-hmm. I like that picture of the scene from Apollo 13 and of just getting everything on the table. I think it it's a good image to have in your mind when you're going into a project with a group, that you want to have everything on the table. You can just imagine if there's some key component, key tool to the whole process that somebody leaves in a pocket, there's seriously an inefficiency there. But it seems to me that there's kind of a leap of faith involved here in being transparent in this kind of way. You have to take that step of trusting the other person or the other people in your group in order to say, okay, I'm not going to withhold stuff. I'm going to get everything out there.
Yeah, definitely. And you could frame it that way. Before you show all your cards or before you throw everything on the table, you could say, look, I'm really trusting each and every one of you to be open and honest with me. So I'm going to give you everything I've got. I'm going to share everything that I know up to this point that is relevant for this project or relevant for this decision to be made, whatever is taking place. So you lead with that as part of the conversation and let the others know that you trust them. And that's why you're willing to share everything you have up to this point. So typically when you are in that environment where there is some undercurrent of distrust and there is an undercurrent of, we got to protect this. And a lot of times it has to do with budget discussions and headcount discussions in organizations. So, I got to protect my headcount. I got to protect my budget. I got to protect this, my territory, basically. And whenever that thought is in an individual's mind, that is going to have them hold back. And that is going to create an underlying current of distrust among the parties because others can feel it. They know when you're not being fully transparent and fully open. And it doesn't mean you don't have a good reason not to. It could be that others at the table have misused your level of trust in the past. And it could be for a good reason that you're not sharing everything. For example, if you're in a negotiation with a customer on a major multi-million-dollar lawsuit or warranty negotiation or whatever it might be, you may not want to share everything in the beginning.
Sure.
But the idea is that you get more trusting, you get more open, you get more willing to share everything as you yourself take responsibility to do your part to get it all on the table. So it is going to be a little bit of a dance, Phil, and as you mentioned earlier, these are all intertwined, the integrity, the transparency, the communication. So if someone is not acting in integrity, they're not acting, their actions are not aligned with their words, they're not doing what they say they're going to do, then you may not want to share everything because it could be put the company at risk. It could be that you put, yourself at risk. And that's not advisable by any means. What we're trying to talk about here in a method to build trust and to continue to strengthen trust, it is to be aware of these three elements. That's what we want to really focus on here.
Yeah. So if I'm in a situation where trust has eroded, then I can approach it with these three things in mind. Maybe not wholesale transparency to begin with, but if I take steps in that direction and I communicate that and make it clear to everyone, hey, I'm putting this on the table because I trust you guys and I want to build trust among the members of our team, then hopefully that will stir up a response of like kind from the others.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the idea, that energy entrains. So energy is like, building others up to the same level that you're coming from. So when you're coming from a level 5 partner, true partner, or a level 6, really open and honest and visionary and creative, that everything's all together, in sync here, that we're all one, looking at the same situation, the same project, the same desired goal. You're going to bring the others in the room up to that point. And anyone that's holding back is going to start to feel uncomfortable. anyone that's distrusting and wants to protect their territory and is really a level 2 at that point, a fighter in one way, they're not going to be very comfortable in a room of people that are trusting each other.
Right.
They're going to feel like the odd man or odd woman out. So they're either going to get on board and say, okay, you can release the grip that they have on information or whatever it might be, and they're going to start to be more open themselves because they feel that sense of community, they feel that oneness, they feel that inclusion. And that's what transparency does. It brings people together. It helps people become equals and become one in the project or the mission of the company or whatever it is that you're up to.
Right. I like that you brought in the energy levels here because I feel like, especially with this component of building trust, with transparency, that it operates at an intuitive level because of that leap of faith, that act of trusting that's necessary in order to be transparent. It's kind of sensed on an unconscious level. You may lead with, "Hey, I trust you guys," but then when you're actually doing that, when you're actually acting that way and putting everything on the table, that level 4, level 5, level 6 energy that you're bringing to the interaction, that's going to tend to bring up the energy of those that are protecting their territory and their budgets, their head count.
You got it. Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. That's the dynamic that occurs. And that's what I've observed from my experience so far with the clients that I'm working with. And this is a situation. I'll share with you just a brief example with my father. He's in the hospital. And we felt like we weren't getting answers to what's really going on, what's wrong. And it's not that the physicians and the nurses can't share what's going on. They just don't know. There's not enough data yet to work with.
Yeah.
So until they get more data, until they take more tests, until they get more to have an opinion and a recommendation of treatment or action, they just don't have enough to share. And it can be very discouraging for people that say, well, I really want to trust your opinion, but you're not giving me anything to make an informed decision on. And the doctor and the nurses are saying, well, we'd love to give you more, but we just don't have it yet. And that can happen in business too, where there isn't always every I dotted and T crossed and figure known. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of moving parts in companies. There's a lot of moving parts in the finances and the budgets and the income and the revenue coming in and the expenses going out. It's not always possible to have full confidence every time that you have everything on the table. And that's, again, for you to know that, say that, own it, talk openly about it, share that, this may not be everything. It's all that I know up to this point.
Sure.
And as the doctor said that to my father, I could see him relax. He goes, you know what? I trust you. I trust you know this better than I do based on what you are able to see. And it was a fascinating thing to observe, even in that scenario, where, the trust can be there very quickly, as long as the person is being honest about what they're able to share, what's on the table. This is everything I got up to this point.
Yeah. That's good. So there's a couple of details there in this matter of transparency that I'm hearing in what you're saying. There's this one, which is communicating clearly that, hey, I don't know everything yet. I'm still collecting data. I'm still learning about this situation, but I have told you everything I know up to this point. And one other thing you mentioned a number of times related to transparency, the word relevant. This isn't to say to your team, well, in the interest of full transparency, I want to say that I don't like you and you have an annoying habit and putting things out there that don't have anything to do with the situation. I think that matter of relevance matters when you consider transparency.
Yeah, absolutely. And, teams are made up of different individuals inside the organization. So you have people with different experience levels, different authority levels, I'll say. So it's professional and appropriate and prudent not to always share everything, depending on who's in the room for various reasons. So it is, again, sharing what's relevant, what as best as you can tell, all of this is relevant. And when somebody says, well, I wish you had told me that sooner, I wish I knew that sooner, I wish you had shared that on the front end, own it and say, you know what, I just didn't know that was relevant at that time.
Yeah.
And next time I will make sure that I bring that to the table in the beginning. So it's okay if it doesn't happen and someone calls you on it and you really, out of innocence, held it back because you didn't see it as relevant and you thought it was prudent and necessary to do that. And then you learn as you go. And each of us learns as we go. And so I think that's also an important part of the transparency, that it's an evolution, it's a process that all of us will continue to strengthen our trust in others. I do it myself with my son and with others in my world, with clients, with friends, with, family members, with others in the profession that I'm a part of. I continue to grow and foster trust with them in different ways, and I'm hoping them with me. So it is something it luckily can continue to expand and strengthen and grow instead of reach a point and then you're stagnant. That's not ever, from my experience so far, something that will happen with trust. It can always deepen.
Yeah, that's good, Sherry. I think that's a good way to wrap up our podcast today, to see that building trust really is a process. I think this has been a good discussion today regarding transparency. Thanks so much for being with us today, Sherry.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for the Sherry Welsh Coaching Podcast. I hope you'll join us again next time as we get into the third part of Sherry's trust model, the matter of communication. For Sherry Welsh today, this is Phil Johnson. Thank you for listening.